students, today we are going to do the poem Keeping Quiet, written by Pablo Neruda from the book Flamingo. Pablo Neruda was a famous Chilean poet and politician. He was a communist and was forced to leave Chile temporarily due to his political ideology. He gained a lot of fame due to his love poems and also his political writing. Pablo Neruda has been called the greatest poet of the 20th century in any language. His 10 most famous poems include The Heights of Machu Picchu, Walking Around, Sonnet 17, Poema 20, and Ode to My Socks. Now let's go through the main idea or theme of the poem Keeping Quiet. The poem talks about the necessity of quiet introspection. It will help people to understand themselves and will create the feeling of mutual love and relationship. By quiet introspection, poet doesn't mean total inactivity. Instead, he wants full involvement with life. The reason for the discard and war is the imbalance between man and nature. Quiet introspection will establish a spiritual and physical union that is most desirable for the survival of the earth and of human beings. Now moving on with the stanza-wise explanation of the poem. Now we will count to 12 and we will all keep still. For once on the face of the earth, let's not speak in any language. Let's stop for a second and not move our arms so much. The poet here requests everyone to count till 12 in their own mind and to stop for a while. Maybe this 12 referred by the poet is the 12 hours in the clock or the 12 months in a year. He wants everyone to stop and calm down. The poet urges everyone not to speak any language, as we all know that there are different languages spoken in different parts of the earth, which sometimes become a barrier in our way for peace. So, he asks people not to speak. Not only this, he also wants us to stop moving our arms. By using the word arms, he means the weapons which are used by different countries to raise a war against each other. So, basically, the poet is demanding peace from all of us. We can also say that the poet advocates the importance of silence and self-introspection. It can transform not only the life of an individual, but also the face of the earth. The poet says that it does not need much time to look within and examine oneself. It will take only as long as it will take to count to 12. During this time of introspection, that is self-introspection, one should keep quiet and say nothing at all. It will give him a strange feeling of togetherness with all others. So, self-introspection or self-observation is very important, as it's a kind of a regular check on self-development, which helps us to know what we have achieved so far and also helps us in examining our own ideas, thoughts and feelings. It would be an exotic moment, without rush, without engines. We would all be together in sudden strangeness. Fishermen in the cold sea would not harm whales, and the man gathering salt would look at his hurt hands. Poet says that it would be an exotic or a rare situation when there will be no engines working. Here, he wants to say that if everything comes to a standstill, it will be a different moment. If all the engines like the vehicles and machines stop, then there will be a sudden, strange situation, as the world will experience a sudden calmness. Although it may seem a little strange in the beginning, it will eventually bring us all together. The silence will be free from the disturbing sounds of engines and people rushing to get their work done for some time. So, the poet feels contented, imagining the change that will be brought about in those moments where people will not be in a rush to achieve material things one after another. Further, the poet says that the fishermen will also stop and not harm whales in the sea. This means that the poet is urging everyone not to harm animals. Here, he gives the example of whales, which are being hunted for the purpose of food or trade. Fisherman symbolizes man's indiscriminate exploitation of nature for his vested interests. He also wants people to calm down so that they can stop and see what they have achieved or lost. For this, the poet gives the example of the man who gathers salt whose hands are hurt. So, the men who hurt their hands while collecting salt will get a little rest. In other words, the poet wants everyone to stop for a while in order to see and feel how much they have lost for the sake of attaining such materialistic things. In the next stanza, the poet says, those who prepare green wars, wars with gas, wars with fire, victory with no survivors, would put on clean clothes and walk about with their brothers in the shade doing nothing. In the stanza, those refers to the politicians, the statesmen, and the scientists who are involved in initiating and aggravating wars. The chemical wars which man is waging against man and against nature. Man's activities are polluting the nature, and the chemical and nuclear weapons created by him have brought mankind to its dead end. But the poet says that if everything comes to a standstill, it will be a very different moment. The people who seek fresh wars using fatal gas and weapons will put on clean clothes and get a chance to walk with their brothers. It will create a feeling of mutual understanding. They will lead a hatred-free and calm life, giving a halt to their destructive activities. Therefore, the poet wants us to adopt a new approach towards life and mankind. He says that we should treat our enemy like brothers and promote peace and harmony in the world. In other words, the poet is promoting universal brotherhood and peace. Here the poet says, what I want should not be confused with total inactivity. Life is what it is about. I want no truck with death. The poet clarifies his idea and further says that he does not want that people should sit idle. In fact, what he says is connected with life, not with death. Life is what it is about means that activity is very essence of life. Inactivity is death, but for a fresh, better and useful activity, a little stillness is essential. The poet wishes that there should be no war because he doesn't want to see trucks laden with dead bodies of the people or soldiers. Thus, we can say that the poet clarifies that his wish should not be considered as a case for total inactivity. He only wants to interrupt the sad, cruel, and threatening activities of the world for a few moments and make the people introspect their actions. That is, to ponder upon their acts and realize the results of their deeds. If we were not so single-minded about keeping our lives moving, and for once could perhaps a huge silence might interrupt this sadness, of never understanding ourselves and of threatening ourselves with death. Poet says that we are single-minded about keeping our lives moving. It means that we are forced towards achieving materialistic goals without even thinking about their results. We generally work endlessly with the aim of completing all our tasks. Here, from huge silence, the poet simply means that we should stop and see the consequences of our deeds. In the hope of accumulating more and more wealth due to the fear of death, we generally don't enjoy our accomplishments. So, the poet urges us to stop for a while and take some moment to relish on what we have achieved till date. The expression huge silence might interrupt this sadness means that if we will stop and see what has been achieved by us till date, it will help us skip the sadness which has become so prominent in our lives. That is, the sadness of not enjoying what we have achieved. So, in fear of death and in a greed to achieve most of the things before our death, we never value what we have. Perhaps the earth can teach us, as when everything seems dead and later proves to be alive. Now I'll count up to 12 and you keep quiet and I will go. The poet uses the image of the earth to show how life exists in seemingly dormant things. The poet suggests to the human beings that we should learn a lesson from the earth. In winter, the earth becomes so still and silent that it seems to be dead. But later in spring, it seems to be lively again. It has new beauties and colors added to it. Everything present in the nature, such as the trees, the birds, rivers, etc., get life. Similarly, after a little quietness and silence, man can resume his activities in a fresh and better manner. Just like all the creations of nature undergo a rebirth with a change of seasons, similarly, keeping quiet will be a rebirth for the human soul. It will give a new meaning to our life. So, by giving an example of nature, poet wants to say that all the human beings should stop and try to judge their deeds. Finally, he ends up by saying that now he will count up to 12 so that we all may become quiet. Here, quiet means to calm down ourselves and move towards the path of peace and harmony. After saying this, the poet says, I will go. He says so as he has conveyed his message to the people and wants them to be left alone, to think about it and work in the direction of peace. Let's go through the poetic devices or figures of speech used in the poem Keeping Quiet. Count to 12 symbolizes a measure of time. The clock has 12 markings on it. The year has 12 months and the day has 12 hours. Let's use the example of repetition. Repetition to create a bond with the reader and stress his point. Fishermen in the cold sea, hurt hands are the symbolic images, showing how man is ruthlessly destroying nature and harming other species in cold blood for his selfish need and greed. The hurt hands, the sore hands of the salt gatherer, would make him realize how he is harming himself by his mindless corrosive activities. Put on clean clothes is the example of metaphor. The poet says that quiet introspection will make us comprehend the destructive nature of wars. Man would shed his blood-soiled clothes and don on clean clothes. That is, he would cleanse his soul, heart, and mind, purging it of all anger and hatred. Brothers is the symbol of mankind. Another example of metaphor is in the shade. Just as shade protects us from the harsh sun, we will protect and shelter each other as brothers. Thus, live in peace and harmony. Earth can teach us as when everything is the example of symbol. Just as Earth, the greatest creator, in its sleeping mode appears to be dead on surface, but is actually dormant and carefully perceiving the seeds of life. Human beings too need to keep still and quiet to rejuvenate and awaken the life forces within and be productive. The message we get from this poem is that there is a necessity of quiet introspection because it can develop a feeling of mutual understanding among human beings. It can transform not only the life of an individual but also the face of the earth, where people are led to blindly perform what is expected of them, while sadly not perceiving the impact of their deeds to nature and society. Self-introspection or self-examination can surely give us a strange feeling of togetherness with all others. Everyone is working continuously to achieve one's goals. People are threatened by death, and the fear forces them to work endlessly so that they can achieve everything quickly. In this mad rush, they do not realize the repercussions of their acts. So, we need to pause and come out of the mad rush. We need to be happy about our achievements and celebrate them. Thus, we must overcome the fear of death and relax for a while. So this was all about the poem Keeping Quiet. I hope you all have understood it well.